Okay, we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Freedom Over Fascism. Give me a second to rearrange my screen, as I always do, because I can't manage to do that without screwing it up. So I can see you all in the chat. At the moment, let me welcome you all to Freedom Over Fascism. Welcome Doug Friednash to Freedom Over Fascism. And Doug is a public sector attorney from Colorado. And today we're going to talk about all the legal stuff that can be done at the local and state level, but also we can talk about all the things because it's all interconnected, as we know. So Doug, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience, some of whom are here live, and then there'll be a bunch later on audio podcasts. So we'll have both listening.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Great to be here. So I've spent my life at sort of the intersection of law and politics. Started out after college working on a presidential campaign. Dukakis ages me a bit. And then after that,
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I worked in the Attorney General's office here in Colorado as Assistant Attorney General and Criminal Enforcement. Following that, I served in legislature a couple terms. Went to the private sector, did a lot of public interest law cases. And then I got kind of sucked back into it when Denver Mayor Michael Hancock got elected in 2011. He asked me to be the Denver City Attorney. So I left private sector to do that, and then went to my current firm, Brownstein, where I chair a public relations group, public sector group for state law. And then took a break to be Governor Hickenlooper's chief of staff during his second term, who's now a senator, then came back to Brownstein, where I chair our government relations group on the state level. And that's my flow in and out of the public-private sector. Great to be here.
Well, I think today is, I mean, I guess any day would be great timing, but because everything happens everywhere all at once. I am glad you're here because I want to at least start by talking about the legal avenues, given the chaos of the United States, the capture of the six of the Supreme Court justices, the difference between state and federal court, and what's going on, most notably in Minneapolis with the surge of ICE and the murder of Renee Good. We know that Minnesota and the city are both suing the feds. Can you talk about like what you think about those suits and what can localities, why is local politics and policy and people so important, and what can local action do to protect people and help keep people free and alive?
No, great question. Again, thank you for being here and allowing me to participate in the podcast. I don't think there's ever been a time in my life, for sure, where the separation of powers mattered more. I don't think there's ever been a time when we needed the court system to work right, legislative branch not to cede their authority to the president, and the executive branch to stay in their lane. Obviously, the last two we haven't controlled much, but the court system is crucial to what's happening today. It's alarming to me as both a former prosecutor, somebody who ran a city on the legal side and worked in the state attorney general's office, to see what's happened with this Minnesota case and the way in which they have then made a situation worse and even more dangerous than it was before. It seems to me the immigration policy was started out to focus on criminals and deporting criminals, something I think the American public largely supported. But that's not where it is today. And I think it is doing real damage and creating kind of a third world atmosphere of the United States to to, within our country and beyond. And I think you're starting to really see numbers spike where Americans don't support the president's immigration policy. I saw a CNN poll just flash right before this, where 58% disapproved of the enforcement. I know the abolish ICE polling is at an all-time high. Um, but I think, you're seeing states do everything they can to protect their people. And I think, we're at an interesting point right now in the state, and then I'll come back to it. But there are 36 governor's races in the country this year. While those didn't get the same attention as what we see in DC with midterms, it's crucial. Those are really crucial situations. There's vast differences between how blue states and red states respond to federal engagement, and the way some states acquiesce and other states really lean in and try to protect the public. I think what's happening in Minnesota is very sad and way beyond the pale of what's necessary. Adding 2,000 more ICE agents in that area, which is far more than the police, and putting the pressure on police to respond to all kinds of issues in fire and emergency management is a massive strain. And it seems to have no relationship with the issue of immigration enforcement, especially of criminals. And I think the states like the Attorney General Ellison in Minnesota, and I know Illinois also filed a similar lawsuit on immigration enforcement the same day, are really aimed at trying to, put an end to this and halt this immigration enforcement. As you may recall, Illinois successfully sued in the Supreme Court on blocking National Guard enforcement with a 6-3 decision. And I think they're trying to have the same kind of luck. They're doing everything they can in terms of policy making to, limit the enforcement activities and try to curtail those and protect their public, because it is a powder keg.
It is. And I have people in the chat saying, what if you live in a red state? So let's make sure to remember to talk about that. And another said that ICE just began invading St. Louis with full cooperation of the Republican governor. So we are in a powder keg situation. ICE, you use the word enforcement, but it's not clear to me what they're enforcing beyond power and fear. And they're pushing each day harder to see what they can get away with. What do you think? First of all, what do you think of the lawsuits? But more importantly, are there any strategies you think that could work? We've got all these polls. People are not happy with ICE. People are scared. People are standing up and whistling and doing the whistles and being observers and filming things. But it continues, and more ICE are being deployed as soon as they can get them hired with massive bonuses. So what do you think could work to protect people, whether it's through the legal system or through some sort of popular action?
It's a really great question and a frustrating one. We've seen in this president a very vindictive president who focuses on everything, but really tries to stir up situations like this, create a very volatile situation, and then reinforcing it in the name of, public safety when it's doing the exact opposite. I think we need local leaders first to encourage folks to stand down. And while we do need peaceful protests, that's incredibly important in this country. I think we don't want to put people in harm's way. I think they need to educate the public on what it looks like to interfere with a public enforcement of any kind, and make sure they understand the rules of the road. Because it seems to me, in watching some of these horrific videos, these ICE agents, which don't appear to be incredibly well trained, take every opportunity to, engage and act in a manner in which I've never seen police officers act. And I know on a city level and state level, when officers exceed their authority, there's an investigation. There may be civil or criminal situation, as well as their employment may be impacted. We take those things very seriously. That's not happening. And I think what really scares me is seeing this situation, the AG saying outright before an investigation that they're not going to conduct one. I don't recall seeing something like that. And that is so antithetical to what we value as a society. So I think the answers are: one, I think we have to be vigilant and trying to, make this, try to cool heads and encourage folks to be careful. Second, I think they have to file lawsuits. I think they need to take action. I think we need our leaders to step up and do everything they can to, take action, to look at ways they might be able to limit, like Governor Pritzker did in Illinois, ways in which they can, protect folks and limit these enforcement activities. Unfortunately, beyond that, we need change. I think now more than ever, we need voters to engage and get active and inform their citizens and speak truth to power and make sure facts are getting out there. One of the things I worry the most about is mistrust in media. I think I saw a poll: 28% of folks believe the media is able to deliver news in a fair and accurate way. That's a pretty scary number.
Well, I think
sorry.
I think that reflects the fact that we haven't seen the corporate legacy media actually reflecting news in an accurate way. Does the poll or the behavior come first? But it is very difficult when, the media is responding to, whatever their corporate responsibilities are. I mean, the big media. There's still some great reporting coming out of, New York Times and Washington Post, although the government's going after that. Today, they went into a Washington Post reporter's home to try to figure out what the sources were. So when you say, let's go back to leadership, actually, because this is coming up a lot in all the conversations I'm having. There seems to be a big split between Democratic leadership, elected officials on one hand, federal elected officials, state officials, and the grassroots. And I think the grassroots has been looking for federal guidance on what people can be or should be doing, and seeing this sort of some sort of not necessarily non-compliance, but friction begun by their federal representatives. And Mark Kelly has just started that with his lawsuit against DOD, and I think Alyssa Slotkin I don't know whether she's going to sue, but she also has come under investigation for that video they did telling people to not follow unlawful orders. So if we think about leadership, do you feel like there are leaders, say, starting at the federal level and then coming down to the state and local level, who are actually leading on the attempt to, keep and restore freedom? Or do you think that the states and the grassroots have to lead and then the federal elected people will follow?
Another great question. And there's so many layers to that question. Obviously, I look at local leaders. They're closest to, their constituents. They are the ones that are overseeing police activity, emergency services. They're the closest, and they're the ones that, are putting police officers in the street and answering 911 calls. And they're speaking out, right? I think in their communities, they're generally well liked and respected. They're not as partisan, I think, as Congress looks. And I think they're trying to do their part on the state level. And I think there are a couple bright spots on the state level. I mean, Governor Stitt um, from Oklahoma, who's chair of the National Governors Association, did speak out and say he didn't think it was appropriate to send um, border patrol into Oklahoma and cross state lines, the National Guard, sorry, um, and spoke out on that. Governor Spencer Cox in Utah has done the same. He's spoken out and talked about civil discourse, disagreeing to better and trying to lower the embers. In Indiana, in that redistricting fight, there were 20 some Republicans who joined the Democrats to stop gerrymandering of Indiana and stood up to Trump and Vance, who had lobbied hard. So there are a few bright spots. And I think governors generally work together better than members of Congress, first of all. So I do think there's some bright spots. On the Democratic side, I think we're getting ready for a 28 election. Beyond those governors' races, there are a lot of governors that are seriously considering running for president, and they're responding in different ways. Pritzker and Newsom are probably the most visible. California and Illinois. Pritzker is, passed laws to limit enforcement, prohibiting masks. They're working hard to try to lead and resolve this issue. Um, and I think, some might be politics, but at the same time, they're filling a vacuum and they're speaking out. At the congressional level, I mean, there's so much dysfunction. They don't do a lot. They are speaking out. Sometimes they're targets, but I think we need our leaders to get more aggressive on this conversation. I don't see it as robust as I think it should be. I sat with a number of Democratic senators last night, including Senator Klobuchar, who I know is considering a run for governor and probably would win. And I think part of the problem in Minnesota is you have a governor, Tim Walz, who's wounded over this fraud scandal. And I think the federal government has leaned in, the Trump administration has leaned in to take advantage of that. So it's become this significant hotspot. But I do think our leaders need to do more, and I think they need to activate more. And I think they need to speak out and educate the public, because I don't think, when you get a Joe Rogan finally saying, this looks a lot like the Gestapo, that was a supporter of Trump. He had a big impact on his success. Candidly, I think that's a moment that shows public support is turning. And I think having folks like that speak out and kind of leaning in on our elected officials to, see something, say something, and speak out and fight for their constituents is really key, because this is really unsafe.
It is unsafe. And if you so there's two levels. If you draw back to where the national level is, but even beyond, a sort of more meta, what does the rule of law mean? I hate using the statement, the rule of law, because I think it's too formal and it's really hard to kind of grasp what that is. But the Justice Department basically saying, we're not going to investigate. We don't care whether these folks are following the law or not. And you people out there in the country are on your own, is problematic. And then we had 10 different prosecutors resign yesterday over, or people from the DOJ and from Minnesota. Can you talk a little bit about what you think the DOJ's actions mean for sort of a wider conversation of what is happening in the country? I mean, that's a kind of a loosey-goosey question, and I understand that, but it seems like an important point.
Well, it starts at the top when the president of the United States says he's only bound by his own sense of morality and not international law. That sets a tone, right? And I think what we're seeing with the DOJ and why you're seeing really gifted prosecutors, well-respected, nonpartisan prosecutors step down and resign, which is, it's, if you think about that, these are people that have devoted their entire life to the rule of law, devoted their entire life to doing the right thing. These are well-respected people, and I think they see the leadership saying, we don't care about the rule of law, we don't care about our constitutional duties, we're just going to call this over. There's not going to be an investigation. We're not going to cooperate with Minnesota so they can conduct an investigation of their own. It's sets a tone that the rule of law doesn't matter, separation of powers, they don't respect. They don't respect state elected officials. They don't respect Congress. They're just doing what they want. And I think it is a very dangerous thing to our democracy. And I think when you set the tone like that, I think these ICE agents, who are not trained like police officers. We have a lot of new ICE agents. I think it sends a message like, hey, do what you want. We got your back. Get aggressive. And that's what they're doing. And I listened to the Minnesota police chief, Minneapolis police chief on the Daily yesterday, and you could sense a respectable officer having deep frustration for how that impacts their ability to enforce laws and their ability to respond to situations. But it doesn't surprise me that you then see videos of ICE agents pulling a woman out of a car, like violently pulling a woman out of a car. It seems to me they are exceeding their authority. It seems to me they're not using the best method of pulling someone over, detaining someone.
Well, they don't have legal power to pull people over, do they?
They don't, but if they impede an enforcement activity, they can use that. If they're saying they're using that to enforce immigration against suspected, somebody who's undocumented in this country, they can. But as you know, we're arresting a lot of people that don't fit in that category, and then we ask questions and answer them later after we've detained them and kept them in custody way longer than they should be. So
right.
It just sends a message that it's open season.
So you mentioned a couple sentences ago that it's really dangerous for our democracy. Do you think our democracy is intact?
Is what? I apologize.
Intact?
It's a great question. First thing I'd say is I remember there was a Kettering Gallup poll from November. 2/3 of the respondents, which has been a stay number, believe that democracy is the strongest form of government, but 51% feel like it's not operating, it's performing poorly. So do I think it's intact? No, I don't think it's intact. I think it's at risk. When Americans, the same poll showed only 25% believe that our elected officials are acting in their best interest before all this. That's a sign that our democracy is strained. It's a sign, and watching a lack of respect for the rule of law. You watch these videos and, we do look like a third world country. I mean,
Right.
when you take away that aspect of it, it's scary. And that can happen anywhere. Today it's Minnesota. I think has to do a lot with the fraud investigation. That's what they've said, but I don't think it's focused on serious criminal conduct. I think it's focused on creating that sense of fear and retribution for reasons unrelated to what they should be doing.
What I've seen, it's so different than the longer past than the last 15 years, because there is video of everything. And seeing ICE officers, or presumably ICE officers, I mean, there's no really way to tell, say, have you learned your lesson yet? When someone's just standing there and recording them, and they say, what lesson is that? Like, you're going to shoot me? Like, is that the lesson? Is incredibly scary. And we talk about the Gestapo as a model for this, but another model for it is slave patrols of antebellum America, where it was focused on African Americans, but they could just get picked up and done whatever without any sort of oversight stopping them. The last thing so I think it's both, and I'm actually just responding to a conversation that's going on online right now about what ICE is a cognate for historically. And I just wanted to, I don't want it to become an argument. No, they're not the Gestapo. They're the slave patrol. No, they're not the slave patrol. They're the Gestapo. It's all bad. And I wanted to ask you, so they sent all these officers, ICE people, into Minnesota. There was a really convenient fraud excuse. I'm sure there's a convenient excuse anywhere that they can find anywhere. And at the same time, we have 120 people here. But I know on Substack right now, we've got a couple of really intense investigators investigating the Epstein files who are breaking some news. And we've seen anytime the public gets close to learning more about the Epstein files, something happens, or maybe a lot of somethings happen to divert attention or to make them not come out. So can you tell me what, I mean, I think I know what you're going to say, but what you think of that? None of this is a distraction in the sense that it's all really important. I think, ICE officers killing people in the street. But on the other hand, there's a real desire from the regime not to have those files open. There's no question there. What do you what do you think about that situation?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. I think it's possible. I do think there's so much going on right now. So much of it seems superfluous. So much of it's trivial. We're picking battles with a NATO ally, Greenland. I mean, what we're talking about doing is shocking. It's not in our best interest. It's not a security issue. There are a lot of distractions, whether it's Mark Kelly, Jerome Powell. But I will say this, I do think, my sense is the Trump fever is breaking. I do believe that from a political place, that Republicans, especially in the House, have figured out they are in trouble if they go down this path. And there's evidence of, the ACA vote here in Colorado. There was an Arkansas Valley Conduit Act that was going to provide clean water to 39 communities, 50,000 people that need clean water, passed unanimously in the House and Senate. President Trump vetoed it because of Tina Peters, because Governor Polis wouldn't pardon Tina Peters, who got 9 years as a Mesa County clerk for election tampering with machines, right? Kind of a big deal. Um,
A little bit.
but because he couldn't control that situation, he vetoed this. Now, that entire Colorado delegation, 4 House Republican members, and there's 4 Ds, voted to override the veto. One of them was Lauren Boebert, who also led the charge to release these Epstein files. You are starting to see cracks. I actually think you'll continue to see it as the public grows more informed, and continues to see these images in streets, that are Gestapo-like, in the words of Joe Rogan, that are becoming increasingly less popular. I mean, I do think there's a place for ICE. I'm not supportive of abolishing it, but it has to be reformed, as does our immigration system. But the way it's being used is abusive. And I think Americans don't like the images and the damage it does to a community in terms of jobs and tourism is significant. So I do think we're kind of reaching some watershed moments, and you can try to distract folks, but it's not working. People are going to demand those files be released. I mean, I heard they'd only released 1%,
Right.
and they were supposed to release 100%, a month ago or three,
Right.
4 weeks ago.
I read yesterday that if they release any more, the presidency won't be able to stand. Whatever that means, I'm not
Yeah,
sure. But knowing some of the things that haven't been talked about yet, it could be. I mean, they're doing a lot to stop those
yeah,
things from coming out.
right. In the House, subpoenas, former president, um, and his wife, rather than focus on what they really need to focus on. They want the sideshow to take over the circus.
Right. Um, Last week, I talked to Anat Shankar Osorio. She's a political consultant, messaging expert, and she's worked all around the world. And one of the things that she said was sort of the way that you're talking. The fever's breaking, um, but in order to have that be useful, uh, the the can we vote our way out of authoritarianism?
Yeah, I believe we can. And I believe we're going to have a chance to. And I think the Democrats will win the House this year. Um, I think there is a long shot with the Senate, but it's doable. They got to win all the purple states, and like Maine and Michigan and North Carolina, which I think they will. And then they got to pick up a couple states like Alaska or Ohio, Texas or Iowa, a lot harder, 2 of those 4. I think we'll see how things continue. If you look at the results from 25, where Democrats won every major race and almost won the Tennessee 7th District race, which Trump had won by 22 points. Um, it seems to me Americans' mood is changing and that they want balance. And I think they're going to get it. They'll at least get it in the House. I doubt they'll pick up 41 seats like they did in the first midterm. There's not that many competitive seats. But look at all the members that are leaving Congress. I mean, there are 25 Republicans and 19 Democrats so far have announced. There's a number of senators running for governor because they don't want to be in this anymore. They're unhappy. They feel like they're not making a difference. They don't feel like they're giving back to the public and doing what they set out to do. So I do think it's possible, and I think it's going to require an election. And I think, that it's Democrats have to get stronger in their messaging and branding, and voters care the most about affordability, and all this sideshow is not what they want to see. They need the prices to go down. They need to be able to buy homes. They need health insurance. And this administration is, this machine gun approach to every issue, and some window dressing on the issues that matter the most. And that's to me, a recipe for disaster for the Republicans.
for the Republicans.
Yeah.
So all the folks in here in Substack and in the chat, and it doesn't look like we have anybody from YouTube on here right now, are all part of the activist grassroots. I mean, the community that I sort of am part of on Substack. There's a really, really large activist base on Substack. What, given the fact that national level Democrats aren't leading, don't have their messages straight, don't seem to be able to understand how to exercise power when they have it, what do the grassroots need to be doing to either lead those national level Democrats or essentially take command of their own fate?
It's interesting because I think a lot about some of the Democratic primaries, the kind of Democrats running against each other. And it seems to me, from a big tent perspective, our values are generally aligned, right? I think we care about the same things. I think the frustration is in the pace and tactics, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, yeah, there's some issues that Democrats, are on odds with each other on: Gaza, Israel, Middle East. But by and large, we care about the same things, right? We care about the rule of law, separation of powers, democracy. We care about, the issues that a minimum wage and affordability. We're fighting for tax relief and trying
we
to
want our kids to have a
right.
future, and we want to be able to live and put food on the table. I think that's actually the way we should be talking about it. But yes, I agree. But we also want pedophiles to be punished. So I think that losing sight of that would be a mistake.
And we're at an inflection point, and I do think, the more people get involved, the better. The more we kind of push the envelope, but not toward each other so much, but toward the Republican Party, and work together on messaging. I think it's unfortunate the Democratic Party didn't release their autopsy of the 24 election. I think that was a huge mistake. I think people deserve to hear kind of what went wrong and, their feedback that they spent so much time and money and promised to tell us about. I think, information is super important. But I think, we have to communicate better amongst ourselves. We have to focus on things better. We should try to figure out how we can be more of the big tent party as opposed to splintering and, focusing on issues that really aren't to the essence of what's at stake right now.
Do you have any idea what was in that report?
I wish I did. Yeah, no idea. But obviously it was too controversial for them to want to release.
Right. I've heard also.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, what I have to say is less important than whatever you were going to say.
Well, so. I was just going to say, one of the problems is Democrats are I saw a report yesterday. I mean, in these congressional campaigns, et cetera, we were Republicans are outraising us by significant amounts. We have to focus on some of that too. We have to figure out how to, activate small donations the way Bernie Sanders has, for example. And I think trying to figure that out is important. Trump's got 310 million or so in his PAC for doing the congressional races. And candidly, he's talked about it. Susie Wiles, his chief of staff's talked about how they plan to put him on the ballot. I think that would be the greatest gift Democrats could get. We want him on the ballot. He's going to remind folks of what they don't want. And in the states in 2018, when his favorability rating was higher, in those districts he campaigned on, Democrats outraised Republicans. Democratic enthusiasm is going to be the key to this election. People getting out and getting active, to me, will decide whether we win 10 seats or 30 seats. It'll decide whether we pick up enough seats in the Senate to have control or don't. But I think getting Democrats engaged, active, and being productive and focused on the election is a game changer.
Somebody in the chat mentioned, and I agree. So on the right, they have they have a lot more billionaires than we do. And they fund not only the candidates at even the state level so that they don't have to spend all their time. I did a bunch of work in Indiana, and state level candidates end up having to spend so much time trying to raise enough money to actually run that they don't have a chance to connect with voters, whereas the Republicans are completely funded. And also in the independent media space, what influencer, independent journalism, the right funds it. And on the left, I'm not actually a journalist. I don't claim to be, but all of us who are on here either actually doing investigative work or synthesizing or providing context, like I try to do, are doing it with the limited funds that come with paid subscriptions, and most of that money goes to people who have much bigger audiences, and thus the smaller groups burn out because you know you really can't get by on $6,000 a year. How do you think that we can get more big money? I mean, we know that the small dollar donations are there, although there are issues with how the Democrats are asking for it with the mothership and what is a scam and what isn't. But we're also not being massively funded by very rich people. Do you have any sense of how to raise the big bucks?
That's the toughest question of all. I think we need to find places where there's alignment of self-interest with groups and issues, and really lean into that. I think there's opportunities um, among, look, I mean, Trump drives a lot of business to DC because a lot of folks are really worried about what he might do to them. Some folks are worried, want to take advantage of it. Others want to look at, opportunities, and others are just trying to stay out of sight. I think we need to like categorize those alignment of interests and focus on fundraising there. I think we need unions and um, folks. These small donations make big difference. We need more of them, and I think the more people participate and invest, the more invested they will be in the election. So I think we need to figure that out. I think we have to recruit stronger candidates. I think we need to have a really coherent message and brand.
I'm
Right now,
having Amanda Littman next week, so we'll be talking about
yeah,
candidates and recruitment. But
yeah,
point taken, well taken.
yeah, and I know they're focused on that. But right now, in generic polling, D's are doing better than ours, and among independents, we have a significant advantage. Democrats do. So I think taking advantage of that and thinking through, who are the ones that have traditionally funded us, and look, this is a significant moment. Every election is, but it seems like every time we talk about another election, it's even more like dangerous and time sensitive.
Do you feel, somebody in the chat said this conversation is too conservative? I think the conversation we're having is appropriate to who we are, but I had a really good question ready in my head. um uh so okay, so we're talked about money. We clearly know that money in politics is the root of so much of the corruption that we see, and Trump is essentially extorting or people to give him money for what he wants in order to get what they want. Um, how do you think that we talk to people about, I mean, their central issues, I think, are, I mean, affordability is kind of the easy way to talk about it, but I think they're thinking about like their entire world is sort of collapsing economically in. Um, lots of families that I know, both people are out of work and kids are about to go to college or have special needs or whatever. How do we move the conversation? Yes, the easy answer is get rid of Citizens United, but that's clearly not going to happen right away. To what people like, really what people are going through in their lives, which is their future is kind of dissolving. How do we deal with that? How do we talk about it? And are our national leaders really in touch enough with the voters to know, or are they kind of stuck to the hip of the donors?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is this. Look, affordability is the issue in 2026. You know, the fact that 40% of, I mean, 40 years old is the median age of first-time home buyers when 10 years ago it was 31, right? The fact that health insurance is skyrocketing, families have to decide whether they're going to have health insurance or not for their family. We're going to pay for it one way or the other. But those are real issues. And I think the states are trying to resolve that. The states are taking real meaningful action. I can list 10 things governors are doing: eliminating tax on groceries, you know, increasing standard deductions, all kinds of, eliminating taxes on tips, et cetera. They're taking real action. And some governors are raising minimum wage, like Pritzker in Illinois. Our minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2009. It's $7.25. Like, these are the policies we should be talking about. Forget the national security, the issues that we're dealing with in Venezuela and Cuba and Colombia. They're a distraction. But I think we need to focus on issues that matter the most. And candidly, we didn't do enough before 2025 to convince voters we cared enough about inflation and we're tackling these issues. So we're dealing with that, and we don't seem to have a national leader in this country saying, here's what we need to do and here's what we stand for. Just a lot of voices, and we have to unify our message. We have to, look, there's been a ton of polling, focus groups. We know what the message should be, but it can't be just we want to get rid of Trump.
No.
It's got to be what do we stand for? And I don't hear enough leaders talking about that. They're looking for sound bites. They're trying to, raise their social media profile. They're not focused on solutions.
Do you
And
think, what do you think I'm sorry to interrupt you, but all
no,
those people, it sort of adds up to thinking about the next election and possibly the one after that. Do you think we need a longer event horizon? Like, do we need planning for, first of all, is it going to take more than 2 to 4 years, which obviously I believe it will, but what do you think the event horizon should be for real planning on the Democratic side, for real action that shows that they care what people are going through and also care about what they're saying? Biden, said a lot about democracy, right? But then didn't really act on it in terms of the way the administration pushed policies. What do you think that event horizon should be? How long should we be planning for?
planning for in terms of modeling our messaging, or planning for in terms of results.
Results. So Project 2025 has been in the works for 50 years,
Yeah.
or some version of that, right?
Yeah, we
It,
don't have anything like that. But I
no.
think we need to, and Republicans did, right? Like they had a long runway on what they wanted to accomplish, and they chipped away at it. We have nothing like that. And I do think it's got to be at least 25 years. We need to, I mean, look, there's so many changes happening with AI, um, some good, some very scary. A lot of concern. Are we talking about that? Do we have set policies on it? Are we thinking about where our economy is going to go and how that's going to be built out over time? What the data centers will do? Will that work? Will it not work? What will that cost? I mean, I just don't think we're talking about those things. We don't have a group that's planning that, the best that I'm aware of, that is really focused on, what our short term and long term opportunities are and how we shape policy. And we need that to tell voters what it is we're going to do and how we're going to improve their lives.
Absolutely. How do you think we should make that happen?
I think it's incumbent upon the party to, again, we're a Big Ten party. We don't have to agree on everything, but I think it requires our leaders, governors, senators, representatives, local leaders, to get together and figure out an apparatus to do that. That should be the Democratic Party. And hopefully the party will evolve into doing that. I think we haven't done that, and I think it's going to require. Look, I go to Democratic governors meetings throughout the year. There's one next month, national governors. They are talking about these issues, and they're talking about what they're doing in their states, and they're sharing stories and ideas. And they do that with Republicans too, and it works effectively. But we're not modeling that on a national level. We're modeling that in states, and we don't have a coherent strategy. So I do think it's going to require us to sit down and put groups together to have these conversations and start working on those different aspects.
It's not like we lack smart people.
We have plenty of smart people. Uh, we have the best. They're
Yeah,
great at.
until they, well, we could talk about brain drain later. Um, and people, it's a whole other conversation. Immigration from
Yeah,
I think the first time in 50 years we lost more population than we
I
gained. Our
saw that.
net
Yeah.
has shifted. Um, so we're coming to the end of our hour, and we went pretty wide in terms of what we talked about. I have a tendency I just follow the conversation where it leads. So if you have anything that you think, I'm sure, I know you're not looking at the chat. Lots of people are, hold ICE accountable. Governors should lead more, and gerrymandering, hold ICE accountable. We need something sooner than 25 years. Those sorts of comments, which are all clean energy. Those are all true. What's the thing that you would like an audience of really committed activists to take away from this conversation?
Um, they're very active. Um, I think it's important to get folks who are apathetic, who are overwhelmed by the news, um, feel like our leaders don't care. They're not solving our problems. They're more concerned about Venezuela than they are their grocery bills. I think we need to activate more folks. I think they need to talk to their neighbors, figure out how to make it relevant, teach them how to have a voice in politics, and where they may be able to make a difference. To reach out to their, Republican governor. If they have a Republican governor, reach out to their Republican congressperson, but also to look for candidates to run, local, state, federal. Everyone kind of moves up. It's a joke. AG stands for almost governor. I mean, folks start at local level, they then run for state, run sometimes for statewide, they run for Congress. Like, get active, like, talk to your neighbor about how they may be able to get active in their own community. It makes a difference. And, those policies, like we said at the very beginning, those are the ones closest to home. Like state law, and I was a state legislator, 100 years ago, but, I was able to pass laws that made a difference, and some are still in the books, and I feel really good about it. And I think there are real opportunities to get involved. And the democracy works when we do, but make sure folks understand how it impacts them, and where and how they can get involved, and what their appetite is, but at least to make sure they vote and understand the issues. But I think it's going to require us to really talk together, communicate more, and help people understand, how they can make a difference.
Right. And at the most central level, that's getting out and talking to your neighbors,
Yeah.
and building a community where you are, so you can start to build both power and and sort of understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words before we let you go, about anything, what you think is the most important thing for people to keep their eye on, for a really engaged audience, or just any last thought, or even what's the most radically creative idea you would put forward if you were asked, what should we do if we had the power to do anything right now, or whenever this regime leaves and we can reimagine what we want our country to be? What would your most radically creative idea be?
I'm not sure I have the most radically creative idea. I will say this. Trump ran for office telling people what he was going to do. He did, like it or not. These are things he said he was going to do, and he's gone beyond it. He's become an imperialist. When I thought some of it's different, he said he was going to have foreign policy the way. We need to find leaders with a plan, and we need to execute that plan. We have to not be afraid of it too. He's done 227 some executive orders in 1 year, which was more than he did his first term. Like we need leaders who are ready to lead on day one. They're prepared to lead, and we need to find who those folks are and make sure they have a plan and help them execute it. But I think we want to find leaders with a plan, that are going to, do what they say and not just talk. I mean, I think we've lost some opportunities. I think it's hurt our brand. But while that's not ridiculously creative, I do think we need real leadership, to change kind of where we're at, because there's going to be a lot of work to do to undo the damage that's being done to our country, and
Right.
and it could get worse.
I think it's going to get a lot worse. But we're not going to leave it there. We need plan. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let your people know when this video will be available immediately on Substack, and then the audio will be available in the next couple of days, not weeks, days. But I really want to thank you for your time. It was
a fun conversation. Thank you.
It was a fun conversation.
Yeah,
all right.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. All
Okay.
right.
Bye-bye.